January 28, 1975. Teaneck, New Jersey, 6:47 a.m. Federal agents storm Frank Lucas's mansion like it's D-Day. Sledgehammers, crowbars, the sound of an empire cracking apart one swing at a time. They aren't guessing. They have a number, 584,683 in cash, hidden in the piano. Vacuum sealed in the freezer like leftover Sunday dinner. They parade it in front of the cameras. 500,000 reasons to smile for the evening news. But they don't look up. 10 feet above their government-issued haircuts, wrapped in plastic and sealed in waterproof containers, sits what the feds never found, over 10 million in untraceable bills. Frank Lucas watches from the back of a police cruiser. Handcuffed, silent, calm as winter morning. He doesn't panic. Panic is for the poor. Panic is for the men who touch the product, not the kings who own the supply. The king doesn't shout, the king observes. Because here's what the movies don't tell you about Frank Lucas. He didn't just outsmart the Italian mafia. He didn't just flood Harlem with 98% pure heroin while the 5 families were peddling 30% garbage. He didn't just build a $52 million a year empire by flying drugs in the coffins of dead American soldiers. No. Frank Lucas outsmarted the United States government. Twice. First time, when he hid $10 million in plain sight while federal agents destroyed everything around it. Second time, when he walked out of prison after serving only 5 years of a 70-year sentence by becoming the most valuable snitch in DIA history. But this isn't the story of the fall. It's the story of the ceiling. The money they missed. The fortune that floated above the chaos like a ghost. This is about the difference between a hustler and a legend. A hustler plans for Saturday night. A legend plans for the end of the world. Today, we're not just telling you about Frank Lucas. We're opening the ceiling. We're counting the cost of the crown. We're asking the question that haunts every king. Hit that subscribe button. Because you're about to see how a nobody from North Carolina stole the heroin throne from the Italian mafia, built an invisible empire from a foreign war, and then watched it all fall apart even as 10 million sat quietly above everyone's head. This isn't the story of drugs. This isn't the story of money. This is the story of respect, who earns it, who loses it, and what it costs to be king. July 7, 1968. Harlem breathes heavy. The air tastes like revolution and dying empires. On 132nd Street, the neon signs flicker against brick buildings that have seen 30 years of one man's rule. Tonight, that rule ends. In the back room of Wells' restaurant, behind curtains thick enough to muffle confessions, sits a throne made of leather and legend. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson grips the armrests like a king refusing to abdicate. Heart disease doesn't negotiate, doesn't care about respect, doesn't honor treaties with the Italian mafia or fear the black numbers runners who built fortunes on his word. The doctors gave him weeks. His body knows better. Frank Lucas stands in the corner, silent as shadow, watching the only father he ever chose fade into mortality. 15 years as Bumpy's driver. Bodyguard. Student. Frank isn't blood. He's from North Carolina dirt roads, not Harlem royalty, but Bumpy chose him for the one currency that matters more than family, silence. The loud man dies. The silent man inherits the earth. Come here, boy. Bumpy's voice scrapes like gravel on concrete, quiet but sharp enough to cut decades. Frank steps closer, close enough to smell medicine on the king's breath, close enough to see veins pulsing uneven in his neck. You know why it's just you in this room? Bumpy asks. Frank shrugs. You said you wanted to talk. Talk. Not gossip, not brag. Talk. Bumpy's eyes, still razor-sharp despite the failing body, measure Frank like a final exam. You always knew when to shut up. That's why you're here. The loud man dies first. The silent man lives. Bumpy motions weakly toward the window, toward the empire he carved from concrete and will. You see them Italian boys circling like vultures? They've been waiting for this moment since 1940. Genovese, Gambino, Lucchese. Soon as I'm gone, they're gonna flood these streets with their garbage heroin and tax every black dealer into the ground. Turn Harlem into a plantation where we pick cotton for the 5 families. Frank's jaw tightens. Then we fight them. Bumpy's laugh is bitter, ending in a cough that sounds like death knocking. Fight them? With what army? They got judges, cops, politicians. You fight them, you die loud and forgotten like every other fool who confused respect with power. He leans forward, steel in his spine despite the weakness. You don't fight them, Frank. You make them irrelevant. You remember what I taught you about the middleman? Frank nods. Cut him out. Go to the source. That's right. But not just any source. The source. The place where white powder comes from before it gets stepped on 5 times and marked up 400%. Bumpy's finger rises, pointing at nothing and everything. The Italians buy from Corsicans in Marseille. Corsicans buy from Turks. By the time that heroin hits these streets, it's 30% pure garbage sold at king prices. Bumpy grips Frank's wrist with surprising strength. You go to the source. You cut out every single middleman. You flood these streets with products so pure, so cheap, that Italian heroin looks like baby powder. You do that, you don't just beat them. You replace them. You become what they thought was impossible. A black man with an empire they can't touch. This isn't conversation. This is coronation. The passing of a crown no one else can see. 3 weeks later, July 25th, corner of 135th and 7th, Bumpy Johnson collapses during his morning walk. Frank cradles the old man's head as the legend takes his last breath on the concrete that made him. No hospital, no ceremony, just the street claiming its king the way it always does, sudden and absolute. The funeral is theater. Politicians who took Bumpy's money. Hustlers who paid Bumpy's tax. And in the back row, barely hiding their satisfaction, the Italian bosses. Frank sees them. Recognizes the smiles they think they're concealing. They're already dividing territory in their heads, already planning which corners to claim, which dealers to eliminate. They think the throne is empty. They think Harlem is theirs now. Frank Lucas stands over Bumpy's casket, face carved from stone, mind racing through the final lesson. He loved this man like the father who abandoned him in North Carolina never deserved. But love and business are different currencies. Only one pays rent in this world. The throne isn't empty. It's invisible. Frank walks past the Italians who don't even glance his way, past the hustlers already pledging loyalty to new masters. 2 blocks away, he finds a payphone, drops a dime. Dials a number connecting to a military base 8,000 miles away in Thailand. His cousin Leslie Ike Atkinson answers on the 3rd ring. Frank speaks 5 words that will change the heroin trade forever. 5 words that will build an empire the Italians never see coming. 5 words proving Bumpy Johnson's final lesson wasn't theory. I need to see the source, not the streets, not the corners, the source. And that one call becomes the first brick in a new empire. The kind that doesn't just fight the old kings, but erases them. November 1968. Bangkok breathes war. The air tastes like diesel fuel, opium smoke, and the sweat of dying empires. Frank Lucas steps off a military transport carrying $200,000 in cash and one dead king's final lesson echoing in his skull. The Vietnam War rages 300 miles north. American boys die by the thousands in jungles they can't pronounce, fighting ghosts they can't see, for reasons nobody back home understands anymore. But Frank isn't here for politics. He's here to build what the Italian mafia thinks is impossible, a black empire they'll never see coming. Leslie Ike Atkinson meets him at the airstrip. U.S. Army Master Sergeant, supply specialist, the kind of man who controls what moves and what doesn't in a war zone where chaos is the only reliable constant. They don't waste time on family reunion theater. Ike sees the briefcase Frank carries and asks the only question that matters. "You serious about this, country boy?" Frank's answer cuts like North Carolina winter. Dead serious. 3 days later, they're deep in the Golden Triangle, the lawless intersection where Thailand, Laos, and Burma crash together like drunk neighbors, fighting over the same bottle. Poppy fields stretch beyond the horizon, red as blood under the Asian sun. This isn't Harlem territory. This isn't handshake politics and corner negotiations. This is warlord country. The men Frank meets don't speak English, don't know the 5 families exist, don't care about Lucky Luciano or the commission back in New York. They sit in bamboo compounds guarded by private armies, measuring Frank the way predators measure prey. A black man from rural America who flew 8,000 miles carrying cash instead of promises. In this room, respect isn't about reputation. It's about money. It's about whether you're serious or stupid. The translator works between them. But numbers need no subtitles. The warlords offer what the Corsicans in Marseille can't match: 98% pure heroin. Not the 30% garbage the Italians push in Harlem, not the stepped-on poison that reaches the streets after 5 middlemen take their cut. This is pharmaceutical grade. This is what stops your heart if you're not careful. The price? $4,500 per kilo. Frank does the math in his head. The Corsicans charge the Italians $15,000 for inferior product. The margins aren't just profitable, they're empire-building. Frank offers to buy 100 kilos per month. The warlords don't laugh, they smile, respect. Most buyers start with 5, maybe 10. Frank's opening bid is serious money. But they ask the question that separates dreamers from kings: how you gonna move it? This is where Bumpy's lesson becomes prophecy. Frank doesn't use traditional smuggling routes, doesn't hide product in shipping containers the DIA inspects, doesn't trust corrupt customs officials who sell information to the highest bidder. He uses the one pipeline nobody questions, nobody searches, nobody even thinks to examine. The war produces corpses daily. Boys from Iowa and Texas and California shipped home in flag-draped caskets to grieving families who'll never open them. Military protocol demands respect for the fallen. Nobody inspects the coffins, nobody questions the weight, nobody dishonors the dead by searching for contraband. Ike arranges it through his supply connections. False bottoms in select caskets. Product hidden among the bodies in others. The horrific irony burns like acid. American boys die fighting for freedom, and their corpses become vessels to poison American streets. The same government that sent them to die unknowingly smuggles the poison that will kill their brothers back home. March 1969. The first shipment arrives in North Carolina. 100 kilos of 98% pure heroin, transported in the coffins of heroes, delivered to Frank's childhood home like a demonic homecoming. Frank doesn't sell it raw. That would kill his customers instantly. He cuts it down to 50% purity, still twice as strong as anything the mafia sells. Still enough to touch heaven or hell depending on your tolerance. He brands it Blue Magic, not because of color, because of what it does, because magic is what you call power people can't explain. The economics devastate the competition. Frank sells Blue Magic for half the mafia's price, junkies get superior product for less money, Dealers make bigger margins. And Frank makes 10 times the profit because he eliminated every single middleman between the poppy field and the street corner. By mid-1970, Frank Lucas controls 80% of Harlem's heroin trade. His operation generates $1 million per day. Not per week, not per month, per day. The Italians know someone is destroying their business. They see dealers losing corners. They see junkies switching loyalty to blue magic. They assume it's another Italian family making a move. Maybe the Bananos challenging the Genovese. Maybe Chicago trying to expand east. They have no idea a country boy from North Carolina, a black man they wouldn't let shine their shoes, just stole the throne they thought was theirs by birthright. Frank remembers Bumpy's words. You don't fight the old kings. You make them irrelevant. The empire is invisible. The king is silent. And the crown floats above everyone's head like a ghost they'll never see coming. By 1971, Frank Lucas is a ghost wearing a crown. His empire generates $52 million annually. Not reported money, not taxed money. Silent money that moves through Harlem like blood through veins nobody can see. He owns apartment buildings in the Bronx, nightclubs in Manhattan, legitimate businesses from North Carolina to New Jersey, all in other people's names, all following Bumpy's gospel, the invisible king lives. The visible king dies. Frank drives a modest Chevrolet Impala, wears conservative suits from department stores, not Italian tailors, lives in a nice house, not a mansion that screams wealth. He could buy 10 Cadillacs, could wear diamonds the size of dice, could announce his fortune like a coronation. But silence built this empire. Silence keeps it breathing. Except invisibility has a cost nobody talks about. You can be the richest man in Harlem and still get treated like a nobody at restaurants where mob bosses get the best tables. You can own the streets and still be ignored by politicians who kiss Italian rings. Respect without recognition tastes like victory with your mouth wired shut. The hunger grows. What good is being king if nobody sees the crown? What good is $52 million if you have to pretend you're poor? The silence that kept Frank alive begins to feel like a cage. He wants the world to know who really runs these streets. He wants the respect that comes with the throne. March 8, 1971. Madison Square Garden. Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier. The fight of the century. 20,000 people crammed into the arena. Politicians, movie stars, Italian mob bosses in their custom suits, flashing pinky rings worth more than most men earn in a year. Frank Lucas makes a decision that will haunt him forever. He breaks his own cardinal rule. He walks into Madison Square Garden wearing a $50,000 chinchilla coat. Full length, custom made. A matching chinchilla hat sits on his head like a coronation crown. This isn't clothing, this is a declaration. This is vanity dressed as power. He sits ringside. First row. Better seats than the mayor, better seats than the Genovese family bosses stuck 3 rows back, forced to squint at the action while some black man they don't recognize sits closer to greatness than they do. For one night, Frank Lucas is visible. For one night, he tastes what it feels like to be recognized as the legend he built in silence. In the crowd, Detective Richie Roberts watches this spectacle unfold. Roberts is the wrong kind of cop for New York in 1971. Honest, doesn't take bribes, turned in nearly $1 million in drug money instead of pocketing it like his partners expected. The kind of cop other cops hate because he makes them look dirty just by existing. Roberts leans toward his partner, eyes locked on Frank's chinchilla magnificence. "Who the hell is that?" His partner shrugs. "Nobody I know." But Roberts knows. Nobody doesn't sit ringside at the fight of the century wearing $50,000 in fur. Nobody doesn't carry himself like he owns the building. This is somebody. This is a ghost stepping into the light. That question becomes an obsession. Roberts starts digging. Property records with Frank's name buried under shell companies. Blue magic flooding Harlem. Purer and cheaper than anything the Italians sell. The invisible man in the chinchilla coat is the phantom everyone's been chasing. Meanwhile, Frank's success breeds competition. Nicky Barnes. Flashy. Loud. Everything Frank deliberately isn't. Nicky calls himself Mr. Untouchable. Wears custom suits that cost $5,000. Drives a canary yellow Mercedes-Benz. Appears on magazine covers like he's running for mayor of the underworld. Frank watches Nicky's rise with quiet disdain. Knows Nicky is painting a target on his own back with every flashbulb, every interview. But Frank realizes something strategic. As long as the feds chase the loud man, they ignore the silent one. Nicky becomes the perfect decoy. The lightning rod drawing strikes, while Frank operates in shadows Nicky abandoned. Frank refines his operation, builds networks of corrupt cops and DEA agents who tip him off for $50,000 per month. But his masterpiece isn't the corruption network. In his Teaneck mansion, Frank constructs a false ceiling. Not a safe, not a hidden room. A completely invisible compartment between the real ceiling and the floor above. Inside this ghost space, Frank stores over $10 million in untraceable bills, floating above his bed like a promise that even if everything falls apart, he still wins. Detective Richie Roberts assembles a federal task force. They tap phones, follow Frank's brothers, build a case brick by brick. The circle closes tighter every day. But Frank Lucas is too confident to run. Too convinced his empire is untouchable, too certain that one chinchilla coat can't destroy what silence built. The throne he carved from invisibility starts cracking from the weight of vanity. The silent man just screamed at the top of his lungs. January 28, 1975. 6:47 a.m. The kind of cold that makes steel ache and empires crack. 4 years. That's how long Detective Richie Roberts and his federal task force spent building a case so airtight it could survive any lawyer's challenge. 4 years of wiretaps, surveillance, and sleepless nights chasing a ghost who sold purer heroin than the Italians while somehow never appearing on paper. They identified Frank's suppliers in the Golden Triangle, traced his distribution network through 15 states, documented his money laundering operations through dozens of shell companies. They know about blue magic. They know about the coffins. They know about the Vietnam connection that turned American sacrifice into American poison. What they don't know is the extent of Frank's paranoia. What they can imagine is the genius of a man who learned from Bumpy Johnson that kings don't just plan for success, they plan for betrayal. They plan for the end of the world. The raids hit simultaneously. 20 locations. 80 federal agents. One target. Frank's Teaneck mansion. His brother's homes. Stash houses across New York and New Jersey. This isn't a search. This is a decapitation. Cut off the head, the body dies. They come through the front door with a battering ram, not because it's locked, because theater matters, because the sound of federal authority smashing through mahogany sends a message louder than any warrant. Wood splinters. Glass explodes. The invisible king becomes very visible very fast. Frank sits up in bed as his sanctuary floods with men in windbreakers. Dia stenciled across their backs like war paint, guns drawn. Voices screaming commands that all mean the same thing: you lose. We win. The throne is ours now. They handcuff Frank in his own living room, force him to watch as they systematically destroy everything he built. Sledgehammers swing against walls like Judgment Day. Crowbars pry apart pianos. Power drills tear through floors. This isn't demolition. This is revenge for 4 years of chasing a phantom who sat ringside at the fight of the century while they worked overtime for government salaries. They find guns, military-grade weapons Frank kept for protection against rivals who never came. They find drugs, kilos of blue magic still waiting for distribution, each bag stamped with the brand that conquered Harlem. They find money, $584,683, hidden in walls, vacuum sealed in the freezer like Thanksgiving leftovers, stuffed inside the piano where music used to live. The agents paraded in front of news cameras already gathering outside. They stack it on the coffee table like trophies. 500,000 reasons to smile for the evening broadcast. Frank sits handcuffed on his own couch, face carved from stone, watching federal agents celebrate above his head. Literally, above his head. 10 feet up, hidden in a compartment so perfectly constructed it's invisible even to men actively searching for secrets, sits over $10 million in untraceable bills. Bumpy's voice echoes from the grave. Never keep all your eggs in one basket. Always have insurance. The silent man survives. The agents tear down walls. They jackhammer concrete in the basement. They rip apart furniture Frank paid cash for years ago. But they never look up. The money floats above their heads like a ghost, untouched and invisible, a final middle finger to the government that thinks it won. Frank is arrested, charged with operating a continuing criminal enterprise. Conspiracy. Money laundering. He faces 70 years in federal prison, not a death sentence. Worse, a life sentence that guarantees he dies behind bars, forgotten and irrelevant. The news hits Harlem like a bomb. The empire collapses as word spreads. Associates scatter like roaches when lights turn on. Some stay loyal, believing Frank will somehow beat this. Most immediately flip, trading information for reduced sentences, proving loyalty only matters when the king still has power. The Italians smell blood. The families Frank made irrelevant for 5 years suddenly remember how to smile. They think they won. They think Harlem is theirs again. 3 days later, Frank sits in a cold federal holding cell. Concrete walls, steel toilet, the smell of disinfectant and desperation. A federal prosecutor enters. Expensive suit. The kind of man who measures success in conviction rates and political ambitions. He slides a folder across the metal table. 70 years, Frank. You'll be 95 when you're eligible for parole. That's if you live that long. Frank says nothing. Silence built his empire. Maybe silence can save what's left. The prosecutor leans forward. Unless you talk. We want the corrupt cops, the dirty DEA agents, the suppliers, everyone. You give us that, we can discuss numbers that don't end with you dying in a cell. Frank Lucas faces the impossible choice that defines every fallen king: die silent and legendary, or live loud and betrayed. The crown or survival, respect or breathing, the throne or tomorrow. And somewhere above a gutted living room in Teaneck, $10 million sleeps in the dark, waiting to see which choice he makes. The choice is binary: death or betrayal, legend or life. Frank Lucas sits in that federal holding cell, staring at a folder that contains 70 years of concrete and steel. The mathematics are simple. 70 years means death in a government cage. It means the Italians win. It means his empire becomes a cautionary tale told by men who were never kings. But cooperation means something worse than death. It means becoming the one thing the streets never forgive: It means trading the crown for a rat's tail. In 1976, Frank makes the calculation that saves the man but kills the myth. He doesn't just cooperate, he goes nuclear. Frank Lucas becomes one of the biggest federal informants in DIA history. He doesn't give up corner boys or small-time dealers. That's amateur hour. Frank burns down the entire system that allowed him to exist. Names corrupt cops who took $50,000 per month to look the other way. Identifies dirty DIA agents who sold him protection like insurance policies. Points federal prosecutors toward rival drug dealers, suppliers, money launderers, anyone who ever shook his hand or counted his money. Because of Frank's testimony, 3/4 of the DIA's New York office faces indictment or forced resignation. The Special Investigations Unit, the elite squad designed to stop men like him, is exposed as a criminal enterprise wearing government badges. Frank doesn't just betray individuals. He betrays the entire infrastructure of corruption that made his invisible empire possible. The streets that once whispered his name in respect now spit it like poison. Rat. Betrayer. The worst thing you can be in a world where loyalty is supposed to matter more than breathing. But through hundreds of hours of testimony, through the systematic destruction of reputations and lives, Frank Lucas keeps one secret locked behind his teeth like a final ace in a losing hand. He never mentions the ceiling. He tells them about the coffins, about the Golden Triangle, about blue magic flooding Harlem at 98% purity. But he never breathes a word about the $10 million floating above his gutted living room in Teaneck. Why? Because even in defeat, Frank understands leverage. If he tells the feds about the money that survived their sledgehammers and crowbars, they'll seize every bill. If he stays silent about that one thing, it's waiting when he's released. His insurance policy, his proof that even in cooperation, even in betrayal, the invisible king still won. The strategy works. In 1981, after serving only 5 years of a 70-year sentence, Frank Lucas walks out of federal prison into sunlight that tastes like freedom and revenge. But the world has mutated beyond recognition. The heroin era is dead, buried under the crack epidemic's violence. New kings rule corners Frank once owned, kids who don't know Bumpy Johnson's name and don't care about Frank's legend. The code of silence has been replaced by the noise of automatic weapons and quick money. Respect doesn't transfer across decades. Empire doesn't wait for exiled kings to return. Frank Lucas is 49 years old but feels ancient. The streets don't remember his crown. But he smiles anyway because he has a destination. He has $10 million waiting in New Jersey like a resurrection promise. He returns to Teaneck with hope burning in his chest like the last ember of his empire, and discovers the final, crushing irony. The house is gone. Not just sold. Gone. While Frank sat in a federal cell trading secrets for time, the property changed hands. New owners renovated, then demolished, then rebuilt. The walls were torn down, the roof was replaced. The ceiling, his masterpiece of invisibility, the vault that held a king's ransom, was ripped apart by contractors who never knew what rained down on them. Did a construction crew find it and retire to Florida? Did it end up in a landfill, $10 million rotting under garbage? Did the wind scatter it like leaves? It doesn't matter. It's gone. The money that survived federal raids, that floated above agents' heads like a ghost while they celebrated their $500,000 prize, vanished into construction debris and time's cruel mathematics. Frank protected it with silence while burning everything else. He kept that secret perfect while betraying everyone who trusted him. And lost it anyway. This is the ultimate cost of the crown. Frank beat the Italian mafia. outsmarted the United States government, built an invisible kingdom from coffins and poppies and pure will. But he couldn't beat time. Couldn't beat change. Couldn't beat the simple, brutal fact that hidden money is only valuable if you can reach it. Frank Lucas lives the rest of his life in a modest Newark apartment, works legitimate jobs, stays out of trouble. The king who once made $1 million per day dies in 2019 at age 88, worth almost nothing on paper. But the question haunts him until the end, the same question that haunts every person who ever reached for a crown: was it worth it? He proved a black man from North Carolina could steal the heroin throne from the five families. For 5 years, Frank Lucas was untouchable, invisible. The smartest man in rooms nobody knew he controlled. Then he wore a chinchilla coat. Then he became a rat. Then he lost everything, including the $10 million that was supposed to prove he won. The money in the ceiling becomes more than currency. It becomes metaphor. It's the price of survival, the cost of choosing life over legend, the proof that even perfect planning can't account for the one enemy no king defeats: time itself. Frank Lucas sits in his modest apartment, an old man with old stories nobody wants to hear. The empire exists only in memory and movies that get the details wrong. The $10 million sleeps somewhere under Teaneck concrete or in a contractor's offshore account, a ghost fortune for a ghost king. He saved his life by destroying his legend, kept $10 million silent while burning everyone who called him king, and watched his final victory disappear into debris and decades. Is a legend still a legend if he becomes a rat to stay alive? Is respect real if you trade it for 5 years instead of 70? Is a king still a king if he chooses survival over silence? Frank Lucas beat the mafia. He outsmarted the government. He built an invisible empire from silence and strategy. But in the end, the ceiling kept its secret better than he kept his. And maybe that's the only loyalty that really mattered. The silent man lived. But the crown died with his voice. And somewhere in New Jersey, under concrete and time, $10 million waits for a king who will never come home.